National Environment Agency is a brainchild of the National Environment Management Act. This act creates a unique governance environment. And that is why the Honorable Minister is here. Maybe ultimately, legislative reform would be considered, because public enterprises in general are under the governance of boards. But here we have a National Environment Management Council. Maybe the Honorable Minister would explain the genesis that gave rise to such a situation, and if there is going to be any need for recrafting the architecture, maybe that will be a byproduct of developments that may have taken place and caught up with us. The Constitution under Section 175 defines public enterprises to mean any body, corporate or other body or institution wholly owned or controlled by the government. And the agency is one of them. It states under subsection 5 that the public enterprise shall, within 3 months of the end of its financial year, submit an annual report to the National Assembly on its business and operations during the preceding year. And the proviso is for our committee to extend the time for submission as we have done in order to catch up with the backlog. Honorable Minister, our intention is to present a consolidated report of the public enterprises for the year ended 31st December 2015 to 31st December 2019 because of inheriting a backlog when we started operation in 2017, stretching to 2015. We have alerted our minds to the functions of the Council, which is established under Section 5 of the National Environment Management Act, that it shall be the policy-making organ of the agency, coordinate all policies, whether by government or the private sector, which have or are likely to have a significant impact on the environment. Promote the integration of environmental considerations in all aspects of social and economic planning. Harmonize the plans and policies of the various sectors dealing with the environment and approve all environmental plans and policies. Promote the use of renewable sources of energy and the conservation of traditional sources. Supervise the work of the agency. Liaise with government on all issues affecting the environment. Establish the terms and conditions of service of the staff of the agency. Commission and publish studies on the environment and promote public awareness of the environment. Adopt standards, guidelines, and regulations proposed by the agency, and perform such other matters as government may assign to the Council. We have also alerted our minds to the functions of the agency, that the agency shall perform the following functions: implement the policies of the Council on the environment, liaise with the various ministries, departments, and agencies of government on all issues relating to the environment, and ensure that environmental concerns are integrated in all spheres of national planning and project implementation. Liaise with the private sector, intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, governmental agencies of other states on all issues relating to the environment. Prepare proposals for environmental policies and strategies for the Council. Initiate legislative proposals, standards, guidelines, and regulations in accordance with the provisions of this Act. Review and approve environmental impact assessments submitted in accordance with this Act or any other law. Undertake studies and submit reports and recommendations to the Council on such matters as they are likely to have an impact on the environment. Promote public awareness of environmental issues through gathering, analyzing, and disseminating information about the environment and publishing periodic reports on the state of the environment. Attend to any complaint relating to environment addressed to it. Carry out environmental audits and monitoring. And finally, carry out such other functions as the Council may assign to it, or as may be incidental or conducive to the exercise by the agency of any powers provided for under this Act. Honorable Mr. Management, this agency has tremendous powers to protect the environment. And we are assembled here for a purpose. There is executive oversight, but there is also parliamentary oversight. We are assembled for the parliamentary oversight to be exercised. The starting point of the exercise is the submission of the activity report and financial statements as prescribed by Section 175 of the Constitution, subsection 5. But once the documents are submitted, then they are remitted to the Public Enterprise Committee for a review. In order to start the review process, the enterprise must submit or present the activity report and financial statement, and thereafter the members will subject the presentation to consideration. The environmental agency is before us today to make a presentation of its activity report and financial statement for the year ended 31st December 2019. And I put the question that this august body allows the agency, board as well, or council as well as management, to present the activity report and financial statement so mentioned, except with just an amendment, management, we've seen submitted to the joint session of the Public Accounts and Public Enterprise Committee. Well, we will not say that there was a divorce when we started our mission in 2017, but the reality is that the two committees no longer function together. They have separate functions, and each is a standing committee. So that heading would have to be changed by cancelling joint session of the public enterprise, of the public accounts committee, and just leave submitted to the public enterprise committee. That said, members, those in favor of the presentation say aye. Aye. Those not in favor say no. The ayes have it. While board or council head, the matter is in your hands, and you may submit the reports or cause the reports to be submitted or presented by any of the staff in management. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Here representing the Council.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member for Serekunda and Chair of this Public Enterprise Committee. As you have highlighted, the National Environment Management Act has provided the establishment of the National Environment Agency. And under those various functions that you have highlighted, the functions of the council and the functions of the agency are mutually reinforcing. And as you said, the circumstances leading to this special or unique arrangement for the National Environment Agency, I have highlighted this last year, that after the Rio conference in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, world leaders at the time felt that the environment is being degraded. An environment, without environment, there couldn't be any meaningful sustainable development. And to give that importance to environment and sustainable development, there must be executive powers behind the setting up of agencies, regulatory agencies, to regulate the activities of different sectors, ranging from the private sector, the public sector itself, and the civil society. This is why under the National Environment Agency, we have what we call the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulation 2014, to ensure that the functions of the agency to protect the environment and the public from public health hazards, from other activities coming from industries, from the private sector, is controlled, and mitigation measures are put in place. Adequate mitigation measures, for that matter, are put in place to ensure that whatever we do in the environment is there to support the lives and the livelihood of the general public. So this why, from that meeting, all countries, member countries, were asked to establish this regulatory agency under the purview of the Office of the President, where the President need to establish a council that will oversee the functions of the agency. So this is the genesis. But as I promised last year, I think, okay. As I said last year, that we have embarked on a series of reforms to reform legislative reforms, institutional reforms, to ensure that we capture the realities of our environment. Because even the National Environment Management Act itself if you look at it carefully, there are certain deficiencies that need to be put in to capture what is actually happening in our environment, such as climate change. But in addition, the institutional arrangement for the implementation of the functions of the agency, we have already started the reform process. The document is already reviewed and is now at the Ministry of Justice for drafting, and also other bills are already there that look into, that derive their source from the National Environment Management Act, such as the waste bill, the hazardous and chemical waste bill as well. All these derive their source from the National Environment Management Act, and of course the policy that looks into climate change. And we all know that climate change is a global challenge. It's not only this mic. I think the battery is loose. Yeah, I think it's loose. But I can speak on top of my voice. Yes. As we all know, climate change is already a global emergency, an emergency that is threatening lives and livelihood of vulnerable communities particularly. And those responsible for the high emissions into our environment, how do we collaborate with them to see that those vulnerable communities whose lives and livelihoods are at risk due to emissions, global emissions, are minimized? But how do we work with them? This is the issue that we need to, the National Environment Management Act need to capture. Because at that time, climate change was not on the top of global development agenda. And this is why the need for us to look at all this and capture some of these salient points to ensure that we build resilience of our vulnerable communities, but as well, how do we work with other nations globally to bring all these changes about our environment to have a more sustainable production and consumption pattern for our communities. This is very essential. That is why in 2020 September, the Gambia has reviewed our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement that was submitted to the UNFCCC in September. And Honorable Member for Serekunda and Chair, I am very glad to report to your committee that because of the efforts of the government and the citizen at large, the Gambia is the only country in the whole world out of 200 countries that have submitted an NDC, the nationally determined contribution, revised nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC, Paris compliant. Because you remember that in 2015, countries were asked to submit an intended nationally determined contribution. And when Gambia submitted the revised one with the support of our partners, so all these are things that we are working on to put the Gambia on a development trajectory that is highly sustainable. Not only sustainable, but also ensure that we create employment along the value chain, but also be mindful of the environment. So this is the effort that we are putting in place to see that the National Environment Agency has the power already given to it by the Act, but also we have other acts that also drive their powers. So all these are part of our legislative reforms that we are working on, Mr. Chair. And as we speak, I have just opened today the long-term strategy for climate change for the Gambia, for the process to start. We have already developed the vision. which is already in line with the Ministry of Finance initiative, together with the Ministry of Environment, green recovery post-COVID. Because what we want to see, we want to set ourselves a target. And this target that we set for ourselves is not only coming from the least developed countries, but we are challenging the developed countries that were responsible for the climate mess. They were responsible because they were developing their economies at the expense of the environment. Now it is time for us to clean. And in environmental management, we have a term that we call polluter pay principle. Polluter pay principle. The polluter pay principle. Because the one who pollutes is responsible. So now we are cleaning. We are trying to clean. So those responsible, there was a commitment of 100 billion to clean the mess. At the last COP26, Gambia was one of those leading the negotiations on adaptation, but we are only at 80 billion and we still have 20 billion outstanding for us to be able to do our mitigation and adaptation activities. So, Mr. Chair, why I am broadening the scope of this is to give you an idea as to the kind of activities and reforms that we are working on, so that we have the legal basis to claim what we are claiming. And there are other activities that, if time permits, maybe at the plenary, at the National Assembly at some point, I may be given opportunity to explain to the entire National Assembly and the country at large what we have so far achieved in terms of programming and projects, particularly the National Environment Agency. And on behalf of the Chair of the Governing Council, that is Her Excellency the Vice President, and all other members, I have the pleasure to present to you the annual activity report of the National Environment Agency 2019 and audited accounts 2019 by Augustus Paul for your consideration and adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, representing the Council, the Governing Authority. We hope that introductory remark would actually be also submitted so that it will serve as an addendum to the actual report. Now, may we ask, would you be presenting the report, or would you cause a member of management to do the presentation? If so, could you identify who should present the report, and we proceed?
The management, the executive director who served as the secretary to the council and also a member of the management.
Report so that it will serve as addendum to the